Well, good morning. We're glad that you're here at Elevate. Always impressed, the people that are willing to get up on a Saturday morning and come and sharpen their insights and their leadership ability. Years ago, John Maxwell, I heard him or read it in one of his books. He said that everything rises and falls on leadership. And I don't know, that really resonated with me. It doesn't matter if it's a school, a business, a church, a nonprofit. If the leader is growing and thriving, it helps the organization to move forward. If the leader is stagnant and struggling, the organization suffers from that. So if you don't know me, I'm Pastor Derek here at Journey Church, and we're glad to offer this day to you because I think it's just a beautiful gift to the community, and it helps kind of lift the leadership of all of us as we learn from each other. I always grab one of the notepads and I write down things, and I get something every year, and I've been at leadership for about 30 years. So our first speaker is Dr. Mark Zweifel, and he's the pastor of True North Church, and I think he's doing an amazing job, doing incredible things over there. The difference from when he arrived to now, it's just flourished and thrived under his leadership, and I think he will have a lot to share with us. He's a good friend of mine, and so I'm just thrilled. So if you could welcome Mark Zweifel. Thank you.
Good morning. How's everyone doing today?
Good.
Guys, ready for a great day?
Yeah.
Hey, you're awake, so half of life already happened, right? You just showed up. And Wayne, is there a clicker up here? Oh, there we go. Well, good morning. I just want to say thank you, Pastor Derek, for the opportunity. How many of you guys love and appreciate the pastor here at Journey, and what a great leader and a great person. And Derek and I, we go way back, and it's okay we call each other first names right now. I'm going to call you Derek. You can call me Mark, and how's that? But hey, honored to be here. I thought I'd start by just sharing a story, and I'm going to share kind of a journey I've had since I moved to Alaska. I moved to Alaska in 2009 from Las Vegas, Nevada. You might say, how do you get from Vegas to Alaska? The Bible says to be hot or cold and not lukewarm. And so Seattle was out. We moved up to work for the Alaska Ministry Network, which is the Assemblies of God, the denomination I'm a part of. And we were there for 5.5 years. In the process, I flew to Kenya to preach the National Youth Conference over there for the nation of Kenya. I'm preaching, and they're trying to raise 2 million shilling offering to finance a youth center. So I asked the National Youth Director, what's a youth center? Like a place with a pool hall and ping pong? He says, no, a place to train youth pastors for the nation of Kenya. And 2 million shillings is 20,000 American. So I'm preaching this youth conference thinking like, I've got to go home and in 2 weeks do summer camps for my denomination and ask our students to raise money. At the time I was raising $25,000 to buy a bus. And I'm going, I can buy a bus for 20 grand, or I can pastor a church and raise an offering, and we could build a building to train youth pastors for a nation for 20 grand. And so I flew home and literally flew home, landed. We drove up to Fairbanks where our denomination was holding a youth, their network conference, annual conference. And I looked at my wife, I said, honey, I think we should put our name in for this church. And so in July of 2014, I became the fourth pastor in 4 years at True North Church, or Fairbanks First Assembly. If you know anything about churches, if you're the fourth pastor in 4 years, that church has had some problems or some challenges. And so it had kind of gone through some things. And my wife and I, so 12.5 years ago, we took the church and started the journey. Meanwhile, I was halfway into my doctoral classes, and about 1.5 years into our pastorate, I had to come up with my doctoral project. It's a project-based thesis. And they said, find a problem. And I thought, well, I don't know what the problems are, gosh. And I knew that Fairbanks led the nation in divorces and led the nation in seasonal affective disorder. And so I was going to write a dissertation on the seasonal affective marriage. How do you get a marriage to go through dark times? But the problem is I was studying depression when it was dark. And I was getting depressed. And my kids started saying, Mom, is Dad depressed? But I was studying depression, and it was dark, and at the same time, the church had grown rapidly. We got to a place about 500 people, and at that point, you have to change leadership structures, systems, and structures. And so, the weight of the project for my doctorate, the weight of the church growth, I put my doctorate on hold for a while, and I said, I don't want to be the expert in the circumpolar regions of the world on marriage. And my passion is church growth and evangelism and marketing. And so I talked to my seminary, said, can I do my project on graphics and marketing? They said, well, that's not spiritual enough. I said, well, can I do it on evangelism? They said, yes. And so what I want to share with you today is what I call the gospel road system. And I believe the principles on growing a church or reaching new people for Jesus are very transferable to any business you're in. And I want to be careful to say, obviously the church is a spiritual entity, discipling, raising up leaders and all of that. But there are principles when it comes to church that are very similar in the business world that you sometimes don't think about. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Pastor Derek and I, with the sizes of our churches, do you realize a church of 450 to 500 people, you're in the top 4.8% of American churches? So your pastor, Pastor Derek, is one of the top 90. He's on the 95th percentile of church leaders in America at that size. And you don't get there just because you're a spiritual man. You get there because you learn how to lead people, structure leadership, all those things. So I want to talk kind of what I learned about church leadership as I dove into my doctoral project. And really the premise is that in Alaska, two-thirds of our state's off what? Off the road system. And you have to hop on a plane, or you have to hop on, and sometimes after you get to a hub city, you have to hop on a boat and go up a river system to a community, a village. And so 2/3 of our state is off the road system. And I'm convinced that, do you realize 2/3 of churches in America are plateaued and dying? And what I believe has happened is churches have lost what I call a road system to people that don't know Jesus. So how do you rebuild that road? America used to be a Christian society, a Christian culture. We're now a post-Christian. And so in my project, and I just want to show you something, and I at the same time, I'm going to then show you, I'm not smarter than this thing, Wayne. There we go. Other way, there we go. This is a graphic I did, but I'm also going to contextualize it for business in a moment. In the church world, we have to, a pastor has to navigate a couple different cultures. Okay, if you go to seminary, you'll learn there's something called hermeneutics, which is a pastor has to cross. I call it the Ezra Bridge. You know, if the church is here, you have to cross over a bridge, a cultural bridge, to the original. When the authors of the Bible wrote the Bible, you have to understand the scriptures from what was the author's original intent, and how do you cross back over here and unpack the scripture and apply it to people today. The challenge is this: a lot of churches are good at culture 2 and culture 1. They're biblically relevant. They connect with people who understand scripture, but some churches lack what I call the Issachar bridge. See, Ezra, if you study the Old Testament, Ezra, when they were rebuilding the temple, was a priest who would read the law and explain it to the people. And many churches are good at that portion. But the portion sometimes we lack is what I call the Issachar bridge. In the Old Testament, there was a group of people called the men of Issachar who knew the times and knew what to do. We would call that forward thinking, prophetic, if that's the stream you're in. These people understood the times, knew how to apply it to the culture and reach people. And so the culture 3 would be the people that don't go to our churches. They're disconnected from God. They might not even want to go to church. Now you might say, well, Mark, how does this deal with business? Well, let me bring up another picture here real quick. Let's break this down. You're a business leader. and you have current active customer base. Those are people that they would like your product, they would like your service, they're a part, they embrace where you're at, but you have to, you train your team to cross the bridge to understand, hey, what is my product or my services, how will it benefit? And you're good at telling people that your current customer base, this is why the product's good for you. But sometimes your business won't grow if you can't cross the bridge over here to go, how do I get unusers who don't know you or why they need your product? It's the same principles here. Now, don't think I'm breaking people down into users or unusers when it comes to church, but the reality, friends, is I believe the greatest thing you can ever tell someone is that they don't have to spend eternity separated from Jesus. And I believe that with all my heart. And so when I talk about the gospel road system, I want to break it down. I believe it breaks down into two things. I believe that every church or every organization would need what I call a go and tell road. If you read the Bible, Jesus said, go and tell all the world. And that's really, go make disciples. Go tell them about Jesus. Go take the gospel and break it down in their culture so people are attracted to the God that you're telling people about. And that's the missional side of ministry. And then there's the attraction. Come and see. There's a story in the Bible where there's a woman at a well, and Jesus went to go draw, a Samaritan woman went to go draw water from the well and says, hey, can I have a drink? And he goes, if you knew who I was, you'd be asking me for a drink of water. She went to the well every day to get water for a need, and Jesus goes, I have a living water for you. And they had a discussion, and he goes, go home and tell your husband about our conversation. He goes, I don't have a husband. He says, I know, you've been married 7 times, and you're not the man you're currently living with. But he says, so she went home and says, hey, I met this guy that knew all this stuff about me. Come and see this guy. Come and see. So in leadership, I believe we have to create a ministry or businesses where there's a come and see, there's an attractional side of what we're doing, and a go and tell. You got to raise up. And so let's move on real quick. And so my dissertation was on the idea of how do you build systems that help you strategically reach people for Jesus is what that's the product I sell is Jesus. I believe it changes your life forever. It changes your eternal destiny. But build systems. And a system is something, is something that saves you stress, time, energy, and money. And here's the deal. You have systems by design or by absentee. There's a system at this Weifel house. One of when we had 4 daughters live at the house, they all had, the older daughters had a rotation for who was going to do dishes. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Anyone have that system in their house? And as long as that system works, that means that the sink is clean. If there's a glitch in your system and you really don't mean get your dishes clean, then you're not going to get them done. But how many times in business? I remember I grew up in church. Anyone ever grow up in church where that before we had PowerPoint or we had projectors, we had the old little screens with your handwrite the lyrics on? Anyone talking about? The overhead projectors. And so, well, we don't have systems. Well, you might not have a system, but if you didn't have someone stationed or scheduled to run the overhead projector, your system was to find someone that day and ask him to do it. How many guys remember going there and the guy never knew what way to have it, and they were too slow to change it over when the next song came? Anyone know what I'm talking about? That was a system by default, typically. We have systems, and systems help you. In fact, I'm convinced a good system makes a good leader look great. A bad system makes a good leader look average. In other words, can you develop systems for your business or your church or your workplace that actually serves to help people? In work systems. Now, as I looked at developing what I called the gospel road system for a dissertation, I broke it down, my project, into 3 areas. And I realized that I'm developing the screens here. And one is the pastor. I would say if you're a leader of an organization, that's the leader. And the leader has a staff, they have a calendar, they have a pulpit, or for you, it would be your platform. It would be how you broadcast what you're doing. You then have the promotions, everything. In fact, everything you do is marketing. How many know that? Everything you do is marketing. And then lastly, you have the people in the pew, or you have the tools, the training, the opportunity. And so I remember I went home to Tillamook. I grew up in Tillamook, Oregon. How many guys like Tillamook cheese? How many guys appreciate Tillamook ice cream? How many guys will pass over all the fake ice cream to get Tillamook because even if it's more expensive? Thank you. But I remember my dad says, Mark, you're going to love our church. They did a major remodel. And this is a church I grew up in, Tillamook Christian Center. And they did this big entryway. And you walk in, there's new carpet. And I walked into the men's restroom. And I was preaching as a guest speaker that day. I walk in, the men's restroom hadn't been painted. Now, right next to the men's urinal was the electric heater. You know, the old electric, and it had not been painted, fixed, or a part of the remodel. And so here I am, Tillamook, Oregon. You know, they have the Tillamook Cheese Factory. And my dad says, what do you think of the remodel? I said, Dad, they couldn't even take care of the rusted electric, the rusted, the heater cover. You know, talking about the covers on the side of and I said, Dad, how are you going to get a manager for the Tillamook Creamery Association? When they walk into this building, they walk into the bathroom, and the bathroom hasn't been updated in 25 years. And it's got the rusted electric panel that was rusted when I was a kid. And you want them to come invest in your church? It ain't going to happen. You're telling them it's not important. Everything you do is marketing. And so the promotions. And so when I talked about evangelism and church growth or growing your business, it's not one thing, it's lots of things. It's the pastor, the leader, the count. I remember I was reading about calendars and how you plan things out as a leader. And it talked about how sometimes you have, anyone ever have those long calendar planning meetings where you all pull all the departments together? I was a part of a large church, and we take all day to walk through a calendar. We don't do any calendar planning meetings at True North. We have an annual calendar. We know Christmas is coming. We know Easter's coming. We know the 4 weeks before Christmas, we have to do marketing. 6 weeks before Easter, we got the stuff ready. We're working on things. Our life group starts certain Sundays every year. We don't have to sit there with every department and plan out the whole year. There are certain things that are going to happen. Calendar dates don't sneak up on you. Cats do. So how do you plan and organize and structure your church or your business for things that are always going to happen? Now, there's always things that pop up, but what are the annual things? So you plan that, you schedule your promotions. Everything you do is marketing. The people in the pew. How do you give the people the tools, the training, and the opportunities? One of the goals at True North Church is, how do I raise the evangelism temperature in the pew every year? How do I raise everyone's evangelism temperature? And so there's things we do at Christmas time, at Easter time. There's things we do that give people opportunities to and tools and training to grow in their evangelism temperature. But as owners, are there things you're doing in fact, my wife was just down looking at a thrift store in Wasilla, or actually in Palmer, for Church on the Rock, Thrifters Rock. And they had their year-long calendar. They know that February's coming, and a month before February, all the red stuff's getting out there, all of the pink stuff for Valentine's, and they know right after that there's prom. So all the prom, they have every month, they know what is going to be on sale, what colors to put on things, to move it out because they got to move the next thing in. They planned it out. Friends, our churches and businesses should be, we should think about what are we promoting? What are we lining up? What are we marketing? And so that's important. Now with that, I broke down, and this is for the church, but I think it's for any organization, is I call the 7 lanes of marketing. And see, sometimes we think marketing is a brochure or a website, but I put number 1. I think our church facilities are number 1. How many guys, when you walk in the Journey, you go, they have an eye for excellence. It's clean. It's organized. And the electric heater's right next to the men's urinal. No. It looks great, Pastor Derek. Your building looks excellent. And so, if you're a business owner, what's your building look like? What's your entryway look like? What are your bathrooms, the first impressions, the worship? You know, at a church, people make a decision to come back to your church before they ever walk into the auditorium, typically. For us, I did a deep demographic of our city before I moved here. Do you realize that 46% of Fairbanksans have someone 12 years of age or under in their home? which tells you children's ministry better be the number one priority at a church. Because 46% of our audience or potential people that could come to our church have people the age they're going to be in kids' church. So it better be clean, it better be well staffed, it better be well organized. And so when I got to Fairbanks, they cut kids ministry in the summertime. They didn't do kids ministry. Well, then no one comes to church. And I realized what they meant was no one on my board came to church in the summertime. If you have young kids in your house, you can't afford to be gone every weekend. So you have to understand, and so the marketing things, the first impressions, the worship experience, denominational history, digital media, print, social, that's all important. In Fairbanks, though, I think your building and your first impressions sometimes might even be more important than your marketing materials you put out there, because Fairbanks is not the same as Seattle or the same as Anchorage. And so the 7 lanes. And so as a leader, looking at the different lanes of how are we doing in all the different avenues, because everything we do is marketing. Everything we do. Now there's 3 keys to marketing, and I'll just walk through this real quick. And are we doing okay, guys? And so 3, as I wrote my project, there's demographics. That's who's in your city, who are the people. And obviously with the military base and the university, this was probably 7-8 years ago, I did the research on this. We'll say hello and goodbye to 60,000 people in Fairbanks, Alaska in the next 7 years. Between the Air Force, the military, and the university. That's a lot of people we'll say hello and goodbye to. And so as a church, you have to realize you have to get good at saying hello and good at saying goodbye. That's the demographic. Now, then you have your Fairbanksans. They live here all the time. But the reality is you have to, which means in churches like Derek's and mine, recruiting new leaders is always going to be a challenge. Because if you're reaching your city, for me and for Derek, that means a third of our church is going to shift every 3 to 4 years. We say hello, we probably say goodbye to 100 to 200 people every single year who military is transitioning. So you have to be good, understand your demographics, the psychographics. Why do people buy your product, or why do people come to your church? What are the decisions? When I moved to Alaska, I went to a church in Anchorage. And while I was in Anchorage, this church required that when you came to church, you had to be there for 6 months before you could take a membership class. So you had to attend for 6 months. And then you had to do a membership class, which was like 3 months long, before you could serve somewhere in the church. And here I am, I work for the denomination, the credentials, the pastors at this organization, and I had to be there 9 months before I could be a volunteer youth leader, and yet I led the youth department for the state of Alaska in our denomination. And then we had a life group with all these, all the military folks from J-Bear, and they're like, man, I'd like to get, and I kept seeing them leave the church because they're like, we just want to get plugged in. I move here, Fairbanks First Assembly. Sure enough, 6 months before you go to membership class, 3-month membership class, I met with the board. It says, no, we're going to make a very simple way for people to get involved at True North Church, because military personnel, psychographics say, I want to get plugged in fast because I want my kids to feel like they have a base, a home base for a season. So we changed a lot of ministries very quick. Because the psychographics, if you want to reach new people, you have to change how you think. So I don't know what the psychographics are for your departments, what you're leading, but you have to understand that. And then the last one is, I call it the churchographics. Now this could be, who are your clients? Who buys your product and services? And so there's a website out there called batchgeo.com. Have you heard of batchgeo.com? Batchgeo.com, you can upload 250 addresses to batchgeo.com, and you can push a button and it'll give you a pin map of where your customers are coming from. And so we started uploading all the people that came to True North, started uploading the database to realize, where are people coming from to go to True North? So it was Eielson, Wainwright, and then sometimes you see different pockets around your city, and you go, okay, we need to have a life group up on that hill because there's a dozen families coming from that area. And then you also can kind of, what's similar among those folks? And you can begin to target and develop ministry or products or services, if you're in business, for those people. I call it churchographics. You got to know who is buying your product. And for us, who's coming to church from these areas that's growing in Christ, and where are they coming from? And then from that, you can develop. And so that's kind of the big picture of this stuff. I don't know if there's one more picture here. No, that's not. And so, but I'm done on my talk here. I guess it's Q&A a little bit. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. I know I just kind of but I think churches need to understand their communities and the people that aren't coming to their church to go, how do I track them and how do I raise the people up in the pew to go reach those people for Jesus? Because I believe what churches sell is a relationship with Christ that gives people fire insurance, retirement benefits out of this world. We give them Jesus. And so, but in the business world, what are you selling? What are you providing for people that's going to be a benefit? So any thoughts or questions?
So you can either text me, or Carrie is in the back and she has a microphone if you want to raise your hand and, just speak a question. So looks like, do you have a question? Oh, okay.
Dave, be careful when you raise your hand.
All right. One thing on the demographics I'll just throw out, because I was just reading something they passed out at Chamber. The fastest growing demographic in Fairbanks in the interior, if I understood the report right, is senior citizens.
Yeah, that's growing fast.
So that was really interesting to me. That's not what I expected to read with our military bases and just the harshness of the climate. And so just think about that, you business people, nonprofit people, think about the fact that the fastest growing demographic are senior citizens. So we're processing that. We're thinking about that.
Housing's not as cheap in the lower 48 as it used to be.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I don't know. Maybe you explained it perfectly. I got no questions. We good? All right. Give him a hand. Thank you. All right. Dave Durham is our next. He's going to come on up, and we're going to interview him. And many of you know him. He's a great guy. He is the CEO of, or president, sorry. They're in transition, they're in succession. So he's the president of Mount McKinley Bank. And he is following a legend, Patty Mongold, who's been there, I don't know how many years she's been there, 50 years at the bank. And so I wanted to interview Dave and just ask him some questions. And so you can text me questions that we can ask him, or you'll get a chance after I've asked a few to, raise your hand and ask him some questions. So just excited about talking to Dave. He just does a great job, really cares about this community, has helped with the rescue mission a lot over the years in various ways, and just been and he's an incredible shot. So if you like to go shooting, he's your guy. So I think he even makes his own bullets, right? Am I remembering that right? So yeah. So my first question, Dave, is what do you think are some keys to good leadership?
Well, first, Jared, thank you.
Is the light on?
There we go. Thanks,
There you
Derek.
go.
I want to just say I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity. And Mark, thank you for what you said. I really appreciated that. I have a really unique task of following Patty Mongold as the CEO president for Mount McKinley Bank. And we just celebrated our 60th anniversary this December. And then Patty celebrated her 50th anniversary at the bank in January. So when I say that I have big shoes to fill, I told Patty I feel like she's wearing clown shoes and I have little ballerina shoes. So, but when we talk about leadership, I've really have benefited from getting to work with Patty and some other great leaders through my banking career. But Derek has asked me a couple times to meet with some of the staff and some of the young men of the church here at Journey. And I always tell people, first off, be yourself. I think part of leadership, there's a lot of different views on how to be a good leader, what a leader does, and things like that. For me, I think we each are made differently, and I think it's important that you be yourself, and I think what that brings is consistency. I think when you try to follow a model in leadership and you're not yourself, I think that leads to inconsistency, and then that really kind of frustrates your employees when you don't do things in a consistent manner. And I also want to say that I think it's also important that you build others up. So if you were to ask me if I was to define my leadership system, it would really be more of a servant leadership. We have a young man at work. He was out of a homeschool program, and the program asked if they could come and talk to bankers. They had about 10 kids that wanted to know more about the financial institutions, and I just made a pitch there. I said, hey, do any of you want to come work for the bank? And we had a young man that did. He worked part-time, and now he's full-time in our accounting department, and he was sitting next to me one day, and he goes, I want your job someday. And I said, great. And I says, I'm going to fail if I don't prepare you for that. And so, I think being a good leader is your willingness to invest in others to help them achieve. I hope someday I train someone that takes my job. That's my goal.
Okay. What is a leadership mistake you've made, and what did you learn from it?
This is one of the questions you gave me that really caused me a great deal of stress. So it's not really a leadership mistake, but I think that the leadership of the bank that I used to work for, they had a rule. Like I started out as a teller. So in 1992, I showed up in Alaska. I got a job as a teller with Mount McKinley Bank, and they had a rule. If you were off $1,000 in a day, you were automatically fired. So this is early December. We were really busy. This is back in where everybody came to the bank, and I was at the Northern Lights and Sea branch in Anchorage, which was National Bank of Alaska's busiest branch. And unfortunately, I gave some lady $1,000 too much. Fortunately, and this is why today, if you ask me what my favorite denomination of currency is, I'll tell you it's a nickel. Because somehow, somewhere, I shorted a guy a nickel. So I was $999.95 off, and it saved my career. Now, let's look forward to today. Here I am. I'm on the precipice of taking the leadership position of Mount McKinley Bank, and I realize that I'm still in banking today because of a nickel. That's a pretty interesting thought. So, in hindsight, maybe firing somebody for that $1,000 being off, maybe not a good thing. I certainly probably wouldn't be in banking today if I got fired. But here's the funny thing. About 2-3 weeks after Christmas, the lady that I gave the $1,000 to came back and said, hey, that young man gave me $1,000 too much, but I decided I was going to go buy my grandkids Christmas presents, so I'm bringing it back. So the money came back, but that nickel saved my bacon. So that was probably my largest mistake, because that could have taken me out of the banking world.
Okay. All right. So you're currently in an important succession plan where you're taking over from, longtime CEO Patty Mongold. What lessons can you share about successful succession?
Well, the banking industry is highly regulated, and so the FDIC, who is our regulator, they require that we have a succession plan. So succession planning is something that as a financial institution we have to do, but I would first off say plan early. So I was made aware of this transition probably 5 or 6 years ago, and that kind of gave me the opportunity to really jump into a lot of things that I normally wouldn't have done. So primarily as a banker, I was a lender, but boy, when Patty had mentioned that, at that time, she had asked me to help her with investments, and so I got involved in investing the excess liquidity of the bank, got involved in some of the accounting parts of the bank, a lot of the interest rate risk management, and there was a day that the individual that kind of oversaw the maintenance for the bank, had left, and she's like, Dave, who are we going to ask to do maintenance? And I'm kind of sitting there thinking, if I don't do it, Patty will do it. So I took it on, and actually it's been great because I learned if we were going to build a building, how to do that, or if we were going to do an expansion. So I got to be involved in a lot of that. So I think planning early gave me the opportunity to really kind of broaden my knowledge at the bank and to be able to work towards that. The other thing that I would say is that I guess encompassed in all that is that I got the opportunities to learn her job. And the last year I moved downstairs, I'm next to her office, and so she's been really kind of making sure that I am getting all the nitty-gritty little details of being the CEO and running the bank, and then just the training part of it. I think that's been very helpful. So when Patty does finally retire on April 3rd, April 4th, I assume the role of CEO, and I am ready to take over.
All right. So since I know you well, I know you're a Christian, how's your faith played a part in your leadership?
The honest truth is it's the foundation of my leadership. As I had mentioned earlier, that I see myself as a servant leader, and I really try to model Christ at work. I really try to treat people with empathy. I really try to listen. I really try not to ask anybody to do something that I wouldn't do myself. So it's not uncommon that you'll see me picking up trash or doing whatever needs to be done. But Jesus is really my model for who I want to be and who I want people to see in me. And I would just say it's everything to me.
Okay. I'm a book guy, but you might be a podcast guy or other resources. I'm always curious what leaders are listening to or reading. So what are some books, like 2 or podcasts or I don't know, seminars you've been to that have been really instrumental in your leadership?
Well, I was fortunate the bank sent me to PCBS, which is the Pacific Coast School of Banking, and I actually had a leadership certificate from the University of Washington, but I'll be honest with you, that leadership class really frustrated me because I never came to the same conclusion as our instructor, and that's kind of where I formulated my opinion that you just have to be yourself as far as for leadership. But other than that, I would really say the Bible has been one of the books that I really go to a lot. But then, Who Moved My Cheese is a leadership book that I really like, and it really deals a lot with just changes. Not being afraid to make changes and not letting fear stop you from doing things, and that things are going to happen, but you just have to be prepared and move forward.
Okay. So when you were starting out as a young leader, what do you wish somebody had told you? Well,
delegate. If you were to ask me what is my greatest weakness, I would have to say delegation is. And as I have had the benefit of climbing through the management ranks at Mount McKinley Bank, I realized that delegation is probably one of the worst things that you could do. Not delegating is one of the worst things you can do to developing people. One, it really helps train them. It helps to prepare other people for growth in their jobs. But I also think that when you delegate, you also build trust in them and help them to build trust in you. So I find that very important. And the other thing that I think that I wish I would tell, and it kind of relates back to when you asked me about my management mistake and that nickel that saved me, is I also think that I wish I was told, don't be afraid to fail, because I think I have learned so many things from failure. And I've appreciated the opposite, especially as a lender. We make mistakes. And so the ability to be able to work through those and make things right and learn from them is a really strong thing for building leaders.
Okay. And then I happen to be reading a book on AI right now, so I'm curious, what impact do you think AI is going to have on your business and your leadership?
I looked at that question and I kind of stewed on it, and the story's still being written. There's still a lot for AI, especially in the financial world. We have to be extremely careful with AI. When you put any information into any AI platform, that information becomes part of a large language learning model. And so one of the hallmarks and the bedrocks for financial institutions, and especially Mount McKinley Bank, is that we have to keep your customer information. And so we can't just dive into AI. We have to make sure that your information is being protected. There are some efficiencies that AI works, you can work. So we've been able to use AI to develop bank policy. It really helps in structuring and getting that written out so it's clear and concise. Personally, I use it just because it's a really quick way of getting information. The Alaska Bankers Association lobbyist reached out to me this week and asked me if we might be interested in, the Treasury has a CDFI IF program, and I'm not very familiar with it, so I was able to get on Copilot and say, explain to me what this program is and what would be the benefits to a community bank and what would be the issues for it. And so I was able to quickly get some of that information, so I didn't have to spend an hour or so searching for it. So I think those are some efficiencies, but really adopting it significantly in our business model, there's still a lot to learn, still a lot to discover, and to see how that's going to impact us. But it's huge, and it's one of those big things that are coming down the pipe that is really going to impact pretty much every industry.
Okay. So I'm curious, what advice do you have for a leader who's in the middle somewhere? So meaning that they lead people, they have other leaders at their level around them, but they also answer to a leader above them. Talk to that person for a minute. What advice do you have for that person? That's where I've camped out for most of my life. So I've always tried to be the employee that I would want to have if I was the boss. And so, I try not to. I'm very open with Patty. If something happens and I think that there could be an issue she's gonna have to deal with, I always try to make sure she knows ahead of time. I try to not let her have any surprises because I want her to be able to be prepared, and I really want to help her to do her job better. And so that would be my advice, is really just be the kind of employee that you would want to have. And so that's how I ended up doing all these other things for the bank too, just because I knew that if I didn't do it, she would do it. And so it's and then just don't let your boss have any surprises. Okay. Describe your decision-making process, especially when it's a really tough decision.
Sure. So as I noted earlier, I spent most of my 33 years in banking as a lender. And so as a lender, we meet with a client, we try to ascertain or discover what the needs or what the problem is. We then take that, we ask for information, we compile that information, and then we analyze it. And then once we analyze it, then we make a decision. And I think a lot of typical processes of making those decisions is similar. But as a lender, what I really learned is that once you make that decision, you move on and you live with it. And you don't go back and you keep re-looking at it and re-looking at it. And, most 99.9% of the time, everything works out well, but there will be times when that one decision will not work out. And then you have to kind of work through that as well. But, you can't go back and keep revisiting, I shouldn't have done that. You just have to keep moving forward.
Okay. And this is looking from the outside, but Mount McKinley seems to do a great job of keeping employees. What do you think are some of the keys to good employee retention?
Well, this is when I turn into marketing. So I love Mount McKinley Bank. I remember my second week of being at Mount McKinley Bank, I kind of pinched myself and I couldn't believe that I actually got to work there. But there are so many incredible things that Mount McKinley Bank does for its employees. I've had the benefit of really being part of a lot of the decisions, and here's a great thing. Our health insurance, the benefits that Mount McKinley Bank provides to our employees is really incredible. We as everybody has health insurance, premiums keep climbing and climbing and climbing, and the bank is picking up the lion's share of it. So right now we're trying to have employees pay about 10% of the premiums, and the bank is paying 90% of it, which is incredible. And it's really a fantastic insurance program. My wife just went through cancer, and I can tell you, boy, I was amazed at what they paid. One of the chemos that they gave her was $150,000 a pop. And I mean, if we didn't have insurance, we would be financially broken. The other thing that the bank does is we will contribute to every employee in their 401k. It doesn't matter if they make any contribution to it. The bank is just paying for it. And the reason for it is because we want everybody who works for the bank to be able to retire someday and have a good retirement. The other thing that's very unique about Mount McKinley Bank is that in most banks, the profits really get kind of shared with upper management or senior management, but we have an EIP program that even goes to part-time people, and we really try to spread that across the whole gamut of the employees. And we're as a bank, we're unique. We're a mutual bank, so we don't have shareholders. We're really community owned, and really only the outlets we have for getting the money that we make out is through donations. And I'm really excited to tell everybody in the last 5 years, Mount McKinley Bank has donated over $1.8 million into this community. And that doesn't really include those items that we kind of shove into our advertising budget. And so we've been really faithful at trying to help this community in giving, and the other way is paying employees in our bills. So that's really a unique facet. So I think another reason why Mount McKinley Bank has been such a great place to work and why people stay is that they know that our end goal is to make the community better, not to shove profits into ownership. And I don't have any problems with people having ownership in a bank or anything like that, but working for a bank that really has a community mindset has been great.
And I would just throw out, so the building you're in, Mount McKinley Bank helped make that happen. Now, we did have the joy this year, last year, of just an incredible miracle where someone who didn't even go to our church gave us a $1.7 million gift to pay off our mortgage. So you're in a debt-free building because God just decided to pay it off. So may have heard a bonus or two over there. I don't know because we paid it early. But,
no, absolutely not.
But we were very, very good to work with Mount McKinley, and we appreciate that. And but happy to be out of debt and grateful for that. So. All right, well, we're through with my questions. Let me read one that somebody texted, but feel free to raise your hand and Carrie will go to you. So somebody texted, how do you not take things personally without disengaging? So say there's a conflict or something.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I'll just be honest with you. There are times that there are some things that really hurt, and we have to be in, sometimes when we're dealing with problems, it can get pretty ugly. But at the end of the day, I really try to recognize that where these people are at and try not to take anything personal. And, I'm really lucky. I got a great family. So my daughter's sitting over there. But I when I go home, I just recognize that people in really stressful situations, they'll say things, they'll do things that they may not otherwise do. And I've always had a goal in dealing with people is that by the time we're done, that they're actually happy and walking away. And when that happens, then that's when I feel like I've been really successful. And so, we really try to do what is best for people. And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes people don't react the way you want to. But I think at the end, you're really just trying to do the right thing. And I think that really helps. And, I always tell people you can say anything you want to me. It's not going to bother me because that's, I'm pretty thick-skinned, so.
So somebody wanted clarification on community-owned bank versus a stockholder-owned banks. Could you clarify that a little bit? What's that mean?
So I'll just use Denali State Bank. They're a great bank. They're a very strong competitor of ours. They keep us honest. We keep them honest. But they have a group of individuals that own the bank. So basically they receive dividends, which is a part of the profit that gets paid to them on an annual or quarterly basis. And so they have to balance the needs of paying their shareholders and then also retaining capital in the bank. So as a mutual bank, and I love this story, there were 3 or 4 gentlemen back in the early 60s that there was a mortgage bank here that was really just charging high prepayment penalties. So if I was looking to, my family was growing and I wanted to sell our house and move into a larger house, they were charging some enormous prepayment penalties and making it difficult for us to sell that house and move into another one. And So as a community, they came together and said, we need a new bank in town. And Julian Rice was the individual's name, and he decided that we would be a mutual bank. So the difference is that there were probably about 50, 60 individuals that were willing to give, I think, about $8,000 at that time, which equates to about $35,000 today to invest in this bank without the assurance that they'd ever get paid back. So what they did is they issued debt. So once that debt was paid off, there's no ownership in the bank. Unlike Denali, they issue stock. And so the stock basically they hold and they get part of the profit. So one of the benefits to the bank is for a bank our size, we're about $640 million. We actually can do loans up to almost $20 million, which is incredible. Now we're able to compete with large banks like First National and Wells Fargo and Northrim, but we're just a small community bank that has local decision making, and our board are all local, and so that helps us to really play in a larger field, and that's one of the benefits of being a mutual bank. But we're not really trying to like squeeze a profit out of every little thing so we compare shareholders. We're actually able to do the right thing and provide the best service and products.
Okay. Question that was texted in, what is your vision moving forward, and how do you plan to implement it within the existing organizational culture?
Well, that's a great question. There's a lot of unique things coming our way. For those of you that heard about stable coins, that's something that's coming. That's something that we're trying to keep abreast of. And the consequences to the bank is it could pull some of our liquidity out of the bank, and so we're really watching that. We talked a little bit about AI. AI is coming at lightning speed. I was attending a school last April, and where technology changes used to be years, it's now months. And so and then just over the years, banking has really turned into a digital process. So we've got a lot of our customers want to do things without ever walking into the branch. And then we've got people that want to be able to walk into a branch and meet with somebody. And so we have the challenge of trying to meet the demands of the customers that want to do things on the digital basis, but we also have those customers that want to be able to come and sit down and talk to a human. And so the goal is to be able to provide that level of service to help the bank continue to grow, to be able to leverage new technologies, but not bring additional risk to the bank. As we are kind of on this precipice to grow, we have to look internally into the organization and look at some of our processes and things that worked when you were a smaller bank, but as we prepare to grow to a larger financial institution, and what are some of those processes and things that we've held near and dear to can we change? And so like the book on Who Moved My Cheese, sometimes there's a lot of fear and change, and so being able to help motivate and encourage people to take those steps to change and do things differently and go into these unknown areas is going to be a challenge. But the world of banking is changing, and we're seeing there's a lot of attrition of banks. There's a lot of banks that are merging, and so my overall goal of my tenure as president and CEO of bank is pretty simple, is to keep Mount McKinley Bank a mutual bank and have it be available for my grandkids.
Okay. Another one that came in is, how do you motivate employees, one, who only show up to do the bare minimum, two, to be a team player?
Well, that is a big challenge. It's it is a challenge, and I wish I could say. I'll be honest with you, I don't have an answer to that question. It is so unique. We deal with a lot of. I grew up. My mom and dad, they were both teachers. They were in the same schools for over 40 years. The thought of them doing another job just never came about. And in a way, I was the same way. I started working for National Bank of Alaska. I would have not ever moved probably, but I took Wells Fargo, bought us out, and I stayed with them for about 11 years. And then Bart LeBon, we all probably know Bart. He brought me back up here, and but we have I'm just a put your nose to the grindstone and work kind of guy, and I just do what I've been asked to do and not complain about it. But boy, there's a lot of this new generation, they're all about titles. They're about, they want to be able to keep moving up. And in a bank where you have longevity and you're not that large, that's pretty hard. So one of the unique things that has happened for us is that we've got Patty, who's been there for 50 years, and then we have 5 40-year employees that are leaving the bank at the same time. So that's kind of opened up some movement for people, but it doesn't rarely happen because there's just a lot of people that stay. But one recent incident is talking to one of our employees that was really kind of comes to work, does their job. They do a good job, but they're really not seeing the advancement that they were anticipating or hoping to have. I was very careful not to commit, but I wanted to make sure that they understood that they were heard, that I knew what they were talking about, let them know that we would continue to work with them to help them see what their path was. But really depends on the work and the opportunities. And the other thing that I really want to look at is becoming more transparent on how some of these things work so that people actually know and have that expectation. And I think sometimes when people have the ability to know what things are happening and how they happen, I think that can help them out better too. But it is a different environment. I know there's a lot of people that are writing about about how you keep people motivated and things like that. But it's a challenge, and I wish I could have a definitive answer for you. But it's a case by case, by person kind of thing.
All right, this next one, and I don't know that I've ever met a leader who has this totally figured out, but we're going to get the answer from you. So here goes the question. How do you balance your work and life load? So work-life balance.
Well, I'm going to be real straight up. I got a great answer for this one. Work for Mount McKinley Bank.
Okay, well, there you go.
Yeah, I think, we talked about what keeps people there is, wow, the work-life balance has been incredible. I've been able to do what I in any other bank would probably just be very time demanding. I was able to get home every night to be a part of my family's life. I could take off, and I coach baseball, and so you will find me in the summer with my youngest son doing baseball stuff. It's like with my wife in her illness. I told Patty, I says, I gotta go, and she's like, you gotta go. And so she was pushing me out the door to make sure that I could be with my wife as she went through this journey. So, yeah, Mount McKinley Bank is really, they just really make sure that you can be a part of your family's life. And that, I think, really helps retain people. It just really helps, I think, as far as people's general attitude. But I can't begin to tell you how grateful I am to that bank and to Patty to be able to allow me to be a dad. I don't think I've really had to miss much as a dad by work.
Okay. So this question is, how do you personally navigate between fostering individual growth and empowerment within your team versus making hard, sometimes unpopular decisions that prioritize the bank's long-term sustainability?
Well, I'll be honest with you, that's something I'm really preparing for. I have a unique approach that I hope to implement. I'm just going to be straight up. Patty's been a fantastic leader, and I've been able to watch her as she has, turned to a group of people for decision making, and then I have to make a decision, and so that's really a balance that I'm trying to develop within the bank when I take the leadership position to have the input to be able to make good decisions. One of the things that I'm really going to work hard on is when I go in these meetings, not saying anything, just ask the question and let people respond. I know that people will typically, as a leader, if I'm the first one to state my opinion or my direction, that I'm going to get that regurgitated to me by everybody else in the room. And really what I want to do is I want to foster an environment that people feel like they can be honest and state their opinion, and even down from our tellers, because they're the ones that deal with our customers day in and day out. And I want to be able to give people the ability to speak and then that gives me the ability to hear. And so I think as far as trying to engage people, and there are going to be times where I think that we could have a consensus decision, but there are times that I think as the leader of the bank, that I'll have to just make that decision and go with it. And so, but my hope is when I make that decision, I've had really good input that we can do that and move forward, and it benefits the organization.
Okay. I have a few more here, but somebody want to raise your hand and Carrie get you a microphone? There's one in the back over there.
When you make those really hard decisions and it impacts your staff, how do you go about implementing them to maintain trust and build that trust community even in the midst of a hard decision?
Well, the hope is that the entirety of the organization and the direction that it's been over the decades that it's been there helps kind of people feel comfortable with the decision making. And I'm not going to lie, following after Patty is going to be a big lift because, there is somebody that has an institutional knowledge that grew up in the bank that has been there for pretty much its entire existence. And so there is a great deal of trust that we all have in her. And I'm not going to sit up here and say that everybody's going to have that trust for me. But my hope is that over time in the direction of the bank, that trust will develop, and so when those decisions do get made, that trust will follow. But I do recognize early on in my tenure in that position, there are going to be challenges, and so my hope to be able to is foster that openness so that if people want to come and talk, they may not like what I have to say, but at least I want to be honest with them and let them know so that there's that dialogue and just be able to let people know what I'm thinking as well.
All right. Well, thank you, David. I appreciate it. If you just put the microphone there. Let's give him a hand. Appreciate it. All right. So now we have our entrepreneurs panel, and they're going to take us into lunch. So if those three guys can come on up here. And Wayne, oh, yeah, there's one more microphone. So come on up and have a seat, gentlemen. I'll sit over here. All right. So, farthest away from me is Chuck Lincoln. He and his brother founded Advanced Printing and ran it for many decades and sold it recently. When did you sell it?
We sold it. Is this one?
Yeah.
He's the guy that had a microphone. Is it on? Can you hear me?
It's not on. Okay, so you have the sound guy next to you. There you go. That helps. That helps. No go on the.
What was the question?
Okay, well I was just going through who's up here. So then John Huff, and his newest business is the 8-Star Center, and I've been there for quite a few events. It's a beautiful place. You've done a great job with it. And then we have Tom Bartels, North Pole Coffee, which if you got coffee here this morning, that is North Pole Coffee. And my wife is your big advocate for that. She makes sure that it's North Pole Coffee. So I appreciate you guys coming. So I wanted to talk to some entrepreneurs, business owners, and I always have some entrepreneurs they're business owners and maybe they bought it from somebody else. Many of us who are entrepreneurs, we started something from nothing. My wife and I started Journey Church 21 years ago. We were literally, us and 4 little kids in a minivan driving up from Indianapolis, Indiana, and did movie theater church in the Regal Cinema for 12 years, which 54 below and sound equipment hauling it in and out of a truck in the movie theater was rough, but grateful for what God has done. And I will tell you, there's something to that, to have like a dream and see it become a reality, whether in the business world or nonprofit world, church world. That's a pretty amazing thing. So anyway, I wanted to talk to these guys. We'll just throw it out, and whoever can jump in, and more than one of you, that's fine. What do you enjoy most about maybe the starting or the owning of your own business? You can go either direction. So what do you enjoy most about starting or owning your own business?
I'll go. We started our business, Advanced Printing, in 1980. Who do you think was president in 1980? No. Jimmy Carter. Reagan didn't become president until 81. Anyway, that's how long we were in business. And the business is still running. I loved absolutely everything about running a business and owning a business. Now, my wife told me that my memory grows stronger every year. My love grows stronger every year for the memory of the business. She said, "You didn't really love everything." I said, "I think I did." She said, "What did you love?" And so I loved working with my brother. My brother and I started together. I was 23, and he was 5 years older than me. And we started in his garage on Nordell Road. And I always knew I'd own a print shop because I took printing at a trade school in Colorado. And when I came up here, I continued in printing. But what I loved going to work with my brother every day. Has anybody worked with their brother every day for 33 years? Not everybody could do it. People would come in and say, "How are you guys doing?" I'd say, "Well, it's by God's grace that we're able to get through it, that's for sure." I loved being the boss. Back then, I was the boss of everyone, and since I've sold it, I'm not the boss of anyone. I tell my wife, even my 2-year-old grandson's kind of the boss of me. So I do miss that part of it. Fairbanks, I love the characters that would come in. If you guys have ever hung out downtown Fairbanks or anywhere in Fairbanks, there's a lot of characters in town. We have some great characters, and they would come in, and it was just fun to get to know them and to see what work they had. One of the characters, not to drop names, but it was Marshall Joe. Does anybody know Marshall Joe? He has the truck that you always see holding the gas can up. He would come in, and he was actually quite nice. So we had a lot of characters. I just loved owning the business. And if anybody has any thoughts about ever being in business, I would highly recommend it. It was just the best.
Okay, anybody else want to go with that? What do you enjoy most about starting or owning a business?
Well, Pastor Derek, I just want to say thank you for this event and inviting me and the church putting it on year after year. It's great. If I can just touch on something Marilyn said too, because I say this humbly, I too am a college dropout. And I too hid behind that embarrassment for many years as a business owner, thinking that for some reason it was going to hold me back or whatnot. And I'm here to say that that's not the case. I mean, people appreciate the character, I think, more than a certificate on the wall, if I could put it that way. So thank you for bringing that up and putting yourself out there. But my career, I spent probably 20 years, 25 years, 30 years actually, working for corporate America prior to purchasing North Pole Coffee in 2006. And so my last job I was very happy at, enjoyed what I was doing, was in, middle management, but knew what each day looks like and was happy until, opportunity came my way. So I went from a corporation of hundreds to a business owner of 3. And so talk about a degree by baptism, if you will, learning out how to do things, everything from what we do each and every day, roasting coffee, to paying the bills and paying payroll and HR and all that it takes. And so that was my humble beginning, if you will. And oftentimes I'm asked, were you happy with your decision or would you do it again? It was tough. There was a lot of sleepless nights, and still there are sleepless nights, because I think when you own a business, you're never turning it off. And Chuck's the perfect example of a business owner. I mean, he had a business for many years, and then he sold it, he retired, and I think that's all of our ambitions. We want to be successful, have a good product, and then retire, if I can put it that way.
Is that all there is?
No. I think that's the beginning.
There's more.
Because I have a 2-year-old grandson too. But anyway, the question is, would you do it again? And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. you don't know that when you start, when you look into the fog, but when you get through the storm and you look over your shoulder, it has been an amazing ride that God has presented to me.
All right. John, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I think, business kind of came into me semi-naturally and way early. I bought my first business license when I was 17. My principal wanted to pay me, but he couldn't pay a student at high school, so he told me to go get a license, and I figured it out. Google wasn't a thing back then, so it was a lot of work to figure out. I was probably one of the only high schoolers getting paid by the school to go to school. But then over the years, I've worked for different organizations, just TV stations, arenas, and then eventually I saw the need for production events in Fairbanks. And in 2009 is when I left my full-time job and went full-time with my business. And that's the production company. And I just kind of fell into it. I never went out to be like, oh, I'm going to be a leader. I'm going to own a business. I just did something that I thought was fun. And I think that's one of the things that I enjoy what I do, so I don't feel like it's work. And I've always told myself, if I stop enjoying it, I'm going to stop. Let someone else do it. So, what's our original question now?
Just what did you enjoy most about
What I enjoy-
starting and owning a business?
I think I just enjoy it. I don't know. I read the question originally when you sent out the questions, and I'm like, what do I enjoy? I just enjoy every day of going to work and doing everything and serving people. I have a servant's heart, and just giving back to our community. One of the original things, actually back in college, before I never even got my bachelor's either. Never got a bachelor's. But there was a movie, and it was See a Need, Fill a Need. And I saw the need. Well, no one else is filling it, so why don't I jump in? Because I enjoy doing it already, so yeah.
Okay. The next question I had for you is, what's been the hardest part of being an entrepreneur for you? The hardest part.
Balance. I think balance is probably the hardest part. As a business owner, again, there's no such thing as a 9 to 5, but there is such thing as you only have 24 hours, and how do you balance all the obligations of life? And one of the, I think, misnomers of being a business owner is, now I answer to nobody. I'm a business owner, and the reality is now you answer to everybody. You have many bosses, and they all have needs, and their needs are your needs, because that's how you manage your business. But for me, a lot of the balance of life, when I was younger, I seemed to have more energy. Amazing how that works. And so, but balancing and always being available to your spouse and your family was always a priority for me. And just making certain that, God is center. And I think the rest of it will take care of itself. And it really does amazingly take care of itself. And I think if you get that pendulum upside down, I think that's when trouble finds its way in.
Okay. Anybody else want to take that?
Sure.
The hardest part?
You got something? Well, the hardest part for me was the first 10 years. It was so hard, the first 10 years. We had a saying, we had all these sayings, what we would learn, and the saying was, if you quit, you'll never know how close you were to success. That's what kept us going the first 10 years, because we weren't going to quit. And finally, after about 10 years, we started doing pretty good. People got to know us, and sometimes longevity helps. Just staying in business goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the biggest things I was thinking about this morning is the sacrifice that we as business owners have to make every day, whether, because like Tom said, we only have 24 hours in a day. So what is that sacrifice? Is it sacrifice of your family time? Is it sacrifice of your home? I mean, my wife and I, we sold our house to go buy a warehouse, and we lived in an apartment inside the warehouse. that wasn't luxury living, but we made that sacrifice to grow the business to the next level. And hopefully in the next couple of years, that'll still pay off even more. But, you know, what is the sacrifice that you are willing to make something grow? And what's that for?
And I would just, kind of affirm all of that. If you start your own nonprofit, church, business entity, those first years are just rough. And they are just rough. And you just need to know that. I laughed when you said, would you do it again? And my wife said, if you ever want to start another church, you're doing it alone. Now, she said that in the early years, and she's, we're good with staying here till, I finish my career. But it's tough. It's hard to convey that to people, but it's tough. Like, I worked another full-time job the whole time for 7 years. It's just rough. So, but if you're called to it, it is absolutely worth it, and it's a beautiful thing. So, all right, what do you wish an experienced entrepreneur would have told you right when you were about to get started?
Don't.
You're kidding, right?
I am kidding.
I got a list.
Okay,
I got a
go
list.
ahead.
Let's get going.
I wrote a list for this one. Now, top on my list would be get to know your banker. David might be a good resource there. In fact, they were our banker, and McKinley helped us get several buildings and some equipment. So that would be pretty high on the list. Run your business with integrity. That would probably be even higher. Everything you do, have integrity. Hire a great CPA and a bookkeeper, and if you need any other accountant, get them all, because checks and balances are great. In printing, I recommended having a really good handbook, an employee handbook. And you give it to the employee, because a lot of times employees don't know what's expected or what their benefits are. So in the handbook, have all their benefits, everything they'll ever need to know, have it in the handbook. And then make them sign it and give it back to you, and then you make sure they get a copy. Know your competition and be friendly with them. There were several print shops in town, and we were friendly with all of them. And we would call them and say, hey, do you have some black ink, or do you have some phthalo blue? What do you have over there? And we would call them, and they would say, hey, we need some paper. Yeah, let's do it. Our cutter's down. Could we use yours? Sure. I saw Anchorage. I knew some shops in Anchorage, and they weren't like that. They were like cutthroat down there to their other shops, and I thought, that doesn't seem like a very fun way to live your life either. The people that are similar to you, you don't like them. So that's what I recommend here. Own your own building if possible. If you own your own building, when you go to buy another building, it's much easier. Get out of debt as soon as you can. It was amazing. We were out of debt. We owned the building. We owned all the equipment. Then the COVID hit. How sweet was that? Because we kind of let everybody, they didn't come in for quite a while. And it didn't matter because we could still pay them, and we didn't have any huge debt. So that's what I recommend. Get out of debt. And then the last thing I wrote was treat your customers, employees like you would wish to be treated. The golden rule. And that's what I got.
And yeah, I do joke about that last one. I really enjoy business. I think one of the things, and just listening to that, is you guys are all here. If you're thinking about starting a business, find one of us. Find an entrepreneur that is successful, that gives back to the community, and become friends with them. Have them become your coach, your mentor, your leader, and ask them those questions, because we've all been through that. Yes, you can go generate a plan with AI in 30 seconds for something right now. But find someone that will hold you under their wing to help answer those questions. Think about what you're saying. Like, if I'm starting, like with 8-Star Event Center, all those pieces are great bits and pieces. Your CPA, attorneys, bankers, your other suppliers in town, your competition. Even though it's competition, they still should be your friends, like you said. But just lost my train of thought. Finding someone to take under your wing, or under their wing, to help answer those, because some of your a business you might be starting might just be 2 people, and you don't have to have that full gamut of everything, but they can at least help you get to that point and share those resources with you.
Okay.
I'm going to just add, I mean, I'm glad that you guys spoke on those. Those are amazing and excellent topics. My advice is going to be a little bit more internal, I guess, if you will. And the first one is that I think you stay humble. You always stay grounded. Remember how you got here. And because being humble, I think, is going to carry you through the good times, but it's also going to be very rewarding during the tough times. And there's going to be tough times. And I think that if you can just keep your feet on the ground and stay focused and be grounded, I think that's advice I wish I would have gathered or received. The other one is, surround yourself with good people. We often get in a hurry to hire and fill a void. It was always my desire to hire better than myself. And because I believe when you hire better than yourself, the boat just floats a little bit higher in the water and everybody starts pulling each other up. And I think that goes back to my first comment. You have to be humble. I mean, you don't have all the answers. There's going to be things that come your way that you're going to want to surround yourself with advice. So hire better than yourself. That's a goal. But the other thing is just you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself each and every day that what you're doing oftentimes doesn't feel like it matters, but it matters every day. Showing up is just part of it, but you have to believe in yourself.
Okay. And Tom started getting into this, but how do you hire great employees? How do you get those great people?
Okay, I'll take it. I once had a job interview at the post office. When I got there, I told them I was sorry I was late, but I went to the wrong address. They made me the regional manager.
Oh.
No, that's just a joke, guys. It didn't really happen. When I hire people, I always try to find people. What I would look for when I would hire someone is I would try to find, my favorite one was to find someone that was just out of high school, that wasn't they didn't know what they were going to do. And I would love to hire them. In fact, the guy that Ben, who ended up buying Advanced Printing, was one of those guys. And just the hardest workers, and he was homeschooled. So find a good homeschooler. And
there you go.
So what I would say when I would hire people, because sometimes you have to do a test, like we had to do a spelling test because we did printing, and it was typos are bad. We do not like typos. So I would do a spelling test. Vacuum, can anybody spell vacuum? How about mosquito? Everybody here probably can spell mosquito. Arctic, that's one that gets people up here. Is there a C or is there not a C? So we would get that. What I started to do as I got smarter was I had a friend that was a headhunter. That's a person that helps find workers. And he would let me find the people, and then he would interview them and recommend them. And that worked out really well. If anybody needs a name for a headhunter, I can give you that. He caught a lot of red flags for me. He saved me a lot of headache and grief. That's what I got. Not headache and grief, but I'm done.
Yeah.
I think I can kind of play off that too, as well as like looking for the person themselves. In my world, I've got multiple businesses, whether like the event center and its catering staff or the production world, which the production world, it's hard to find a qualified sound guy in this town that doesn't already have a real job. So trying to find the person at where they are with their heart, with their reputation, even when they're just looking at their Facebook page and seeing what they do in their life and what they post, like looking at those basic foundations of the person, that's what I'm going to be looking at first before their actual skills.
Facebook's a huge resource.
That's all I have.
So I mentioned earlier about not being in a hurry, and I think that's when hiring, I think that's the one advice I want to make sure and mention again. But our business, we are my previous life, we had a much deeper bench and again resources to fall back on, and I'll just say the world was our oyster. I mean, we recruited from all over the United States, depending on the position. Not so much at North Pole Coffee. That's not how it works. I mean, we are a local business, and we draw from our local pool, just like the other small businesses in the area. But one of the things that we try to always do is promote within first, and that is a form of hiring. And I'll touch base on this a little bit later, but promoting within and making certain that your body of employees have the opportunity to grow within your organization and continue to be stretched, that's important to retention. They may be happy in a job, and we have people that have been doing their job for many, many years, and the opportunities come up, and I usually corner them, and they tell me they're happy, and if they're happy, I'm happy. Because it takes, we talk about the wheel, and we're all spokes in the wheel. No one spoke more important than the other. So if they're happy doing what they're doing, I'm happy. But promoting within is certainly a form of hiring. And then probably the best success that we've had through bringing somebody into our family, our work family, is someone already within our organization making a recommendation. And because you're not generally going to recommend somebody that you're not feeling like you could work with. And if you can't work with them, I'm not so sure I'm going to be able to work with them either. So generally speaking, that is probably our best recruitment opportunity. Not always, but it's certainly something that we lean on. We try to synthesize as well. Yeah.
Okay. And I'll throw this out, and this may not be as helpful because my wife's a therapist, but if my wife likes them, they're probably a pretty good employee. If she doesn't, I should probably avoid making that decision. So that can be helpful, but whether they click with you is a big deal. For a long time, I thought it was competence and character, and those are absolutely essential. But there should be some chemistry with you, like you click with them. You smile when you walk in the room and see this employee. That matters, and do factor that. Yeah. So, all right. And you got into this a little bit, but how do you retain great employees?
Well, I guess I'll start again. One of the things I meant to say when we were hiring, we also try to hire for culture. And what that means is you find someone that fits into your team and that's someone that you can work with, like Pastor just said. You want to have someone that fits in your culture. And that goes a long way for keeping them. The other things I would say is to have a modern shop. Ours was a print shop, so I can only go by what we had. Try to make it so it's an attractive place to work and it's not just really run down. Try to keep it up to date. Keep them involved in some of the decisions that you make. Also, what we would do is we would cross-train people. If somebody was on the press and they wanted to come and go to the dark room, we could cross-train them. So by the time they left there, they could pretty much run the shop. And that was our goal, and it keeps people happy if they get to learn a lot. And if you go to trade shows, if you take an employee with you, they really appreciate that as well.
There's a lot. I've done a lot of different leadership seminars and employee retention seminars, and employees don't cost you money. That they shouldn't be costing you money. They should be making you money, no matter what they're doing. Even the custodian, they're making you money by keeping your business presentable to everyone else. But not just retaining employees, but also potentially removing employees. Is that one negative person, maybe they're the best salesperson, but they're bringing everyone else's mentality down. Has anyone else worked in a place where you got that one employee where they're great, but they just bring the mood down when they walk in that room? It might be that you need to remove that person and watch everyone else's productivity levels come right back up. So that was kind of the one thing I was thinking about is sometimes you got to remove that person. And I've had that hard decision as an owner, as a manager, to have to remove someone. But after that happened, everyone else was like, whoa.
When you say removed, you mean fire?
Yeah.
That's what I thought you meant.
Yep. We've had employees that may make a mistake, and you have to remove, even just giving them the time off. But when that person's gone, everyone else sees, oh, they made that mistake. There's consequences to that mistake. I need to make sure I don't do that same thing. So that's kind of the work ethics.
Well, that reminds me of the one thing I don't love, firing people.
Very difficult. Yeah.
And great advice, and piggyback on that a little bit. We don't like to use the harsh words, I guess, firing. We have a culture, and my managers hear it often. We coach up or we coach out, and I think that's important. Both are important because sometimes when you coach out, meaning coaching someone out of your employment business. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I've had many employees who I've coached out come back to me years later and thank me. Maybe some doors open for them. But we weren't the fit. We weren't the good fit for them. And so I in coaching up, I'm going to just say that's opportunities. But I think that's important that you know that you hire with the best intention. And Pastor Derek touched on it, that culture is probably the number one thing when a person comes in to interview, that you try to sift through the questions to get to the human. Because culture is something that, you've heard the phrase, one bad apple spoils the bunch, and it is so true. And then when you have that, what do you do with it? And if you don't deal with it, it spreads. And then the whole team suffers. So, but retention, I personally try. When there was 3 of us, it was easy. We have more than that today. I'll just leave it at that. But I personally try to get to know my team on a personal level. Spouses' names, kids, maybe their hobbies. And that's something that we don't necessarily always take into consideration, but they work for you, say 9 to 5, but they go do other things. Some of them, as David said, is a coach for a baseball team. Some are Boy Scout leaders, Girl Scout. Everybody has other things that they are leading in or passionate about, and how do you intertwine that into your relationship with them? So getting to know your people on a personal level, I think, has helped us retention-wise.
Okay. And then I also like to ask, is there a resource, book, podcast that has helped you in your entrepreneurial journey?
I'll go first.
I was going to say.
So, not to sound cliches, but the Bible. There's three things I want to point out there. Treat others as you'd like to be treated, right? I'm going to paraphrase, if I may, Pastor Derek.
Yeah.
And of course, in our business, make sure your scales and weights are honest, right? Honest business. And then, of course, we all have to acknowledge that God must drink coffee too. He put a whole chapter in the Bible, Hebrews. So, hey, what's not to like about that? So last year, if you were here, I touched on a book that my assistant here will hold up. I got 2 books that are internal and one that's external. And this is called Customer Love. And I can't tell you, every month we have a team meeting. My team gets to read or gets to hear about a real example of customer service. And it's a great short read, great book. David touched base earlier about a book called Who Moved My Cheese? I had that book. It's been on my shelf for probably, 20 years or more. And it's all about change. And change is hard. Change for me, I think, is easy. My wife always gives me a hard time because, I'm okay with change. And, it's not that, well, within reason, I guess. But anyway, it's not, but change in the culture of business is difficult. And I had to learn a hard lesson that not everybody handles it the way I do. So Who Moved My Cheese is a great short read on how to just kind of navigate that change in life. And of course, in business, you want to produce raving fans, and that's probably, this is the external. Raving Fans is again a short read, something that was given to me by a local business owner here in town, Jay Ramrus, made the recommendation to me many years ago. And essentially it's providing the best customer service that you can afford to produce those customers who become your marketing department, if you will. They're promoting your business. And so, Raving Fans.
Okay. Anybody else want to add a book or podcast or anything?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Now, what was the question? Read the whole question because I didn't hear the whole question.
My question was, is there a resource like a book or a podcast that has helped you in your entrepreneurial journey?
Sure. The book that I really enjoy about business is called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And it's not so much about business, it's more just about how you think about money. That's a really good one that I like. Now, you talked about podcasts and other things. I would say one of the things, back in the 80s, we had what was called trade magazines. I don't know if they even do magazines like that anymore. We had all sorts of printing journals and magazines and trade shows. I would recommend anybody in business go to trade shows, and you could network with the people. You meet people there that are doing more than you ever knew was possible. Coming from Fairbanks, Alaska, if you go to Chicago to the McCormick Place and you go to a trade show, you will be blown away what we don't know. So do that and become the expert in the town. Whatever you're doing. And you guys are both that. You're both the expert in town. If I want coffee, I know where to go. If I want some lighting or whatever, I come and see you. So just become the expert in your town at whatever you do. That would be my recommendation.
And second on going to the trade shows, going to something that's bigger than, we are Fairbanks, and I hate saying that, we're just Fairbanks, right? That the mentality that we're just a small little place in Alaska. I want to bring us above that, and that's one of the reasons that I went to the trade shows down Lower 48, because I was back then, I was the Alaska kid that would go to these trade shows, and I brought back all the information that I learned there and brought that so that we could bring the production level up so we can bring our quality of life up here. One of the ones over at True North Church, there's a business group, or a leadership group, men's on Thursday at noon. I don't know if it's still going. I haven't been in a little bit. But Lead Like It Matters to God is a book that we went through. And we read one chapter a week. And I'm actually just restarting it. But just some of those biblical things, because like Tom said, it's our foundation. But how do we become better leaders? And that was a book that I had.
Okay. So a question that came in on the phone is, when did you know you needed to upscale your business? So I don't know exactly, maybe that's buy a new building, maybe it's hire some more employees. I'm not sure exactly what they mean, but upscale your business. When did you take that leap?
Was that for me or for
Whoever.
everybody? We started like I said, we started in my brother's basement, and then we knew we were getting bigger, and there was a shop in town that we were going to buy out. And I used to work for the shop in town. This was 1983 now, so we'd been in business 2 years in the basement. And we got a call, and he said, we'd like you to buy this shop. And it was Wayne Clark from Graphic North. So we bought him out for a short time. We'd moved in. My brother helped him remodel his building, and I went on vacation to Colorado, and I brought my girlfriend, who is now my wife, down there. And my brother calls me, and he says, you don't need to hurry back. The deal fell through. So it's like, So we didn't know what to do. So we moved back out to my brother's house, but this time we expanded to the garage. So that was our first move. And then after about 1987, we said, we need a different building. things would happen, like customers would come by and they'd come to my office and they didn't really like walking through the laundry to get there. Back then she hung the laundry inside. Didn't like that. Another time, my nephew had does anybody remember those guns that you used for nailing that you hit with a hammer and it would shoot it through? He thought it was a blowgun, and he inhaled a nail. So customer was there, and we said, "Oh, we're sorry, we have to go to the hospital right now." So we thought it was time to get a new building. So we found another building on Elvira Avenue in North Pole, and it was a building that was going to be used. It was going to be a house, and it was going to be a berm house. It was just a really nice building. So we got that and stayed there a while. And then we knew we had to go to Fairbanks. We had 3 years in a row where the money stayed the same. The bookkeeper said, "You guys got to do something. You're not growing." And so we moved to Fairbanks. And right then, we doubled the next year, and it just kept doubling. So moving from North Pole, which we love North Pole, but there's just not a lot of businesses there. So we moved it to Fairbanks, and that's where it still is today. And that was in 2001. We moved to Fairbanks, and that's it.
I think I would maybe, if I understand the question, I would answer it with the word frustration. I think you get to a point where you grow and you continually see some growth to the point where the growth starts holding you back. You start getting a little bit frustrated, or you see the next level, you can't get to it because there's too many obstacles in the way, or maybe it's your team that if I do go to the next level, we're not prepared for it, and therefore, your house could come crumbling down. So I think it's a very internal battle for me anyway, and then once you make that commitment, you do a lot of praying. So.
Okay. This question's for Tom. What are some example techniques for coaching out?
I'm going to kind of go back to something Marilyn made reference to, and this is also, I'm going to admit, probably one of my fumbles in my career as a business owner. You have an individual who excels at what they do, and you want to move them to the next level, and they aren't. It's not their passion, or it's not what they do. There's a word, Peter Principle. I don't know if you've heard that before. Promoting beyond their abilities, and so I've done that more times than I care. With the idea that we're going to coach them through the process and whatnot, and then you have to have that honest relationship, that transparency with them when things aren't going quite as they should. And I think that's something that in any business, whether you're an owner or a manager of any type, you can't waffle. You have to be sincere. We all want to have a good time. We all want to, raise each other up, but there are days when you have to be completely honest with the person. We've had work improvement programs where, in these particular cases, you have to own it too. It's not necessarily their fault. And we've had many employees not get coached out, but get coached back to their comfort zone. And to me, that has been a win-win. If you can retain that relationship and help them continue to be part of your team. But how do you coach them out? I think it's just through the process of being transparent and honest. And I think everyone appreciates that.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you guys sharing. Lunch is ready, and so I do need to wrap this up. So can we give them a hand? Appreciate it, guys. Thank you. All right, so before I let you go to lunch, I just want to mention something. So on the tables, and so what we'll do is, you'll go, I'll dismiss this half of the room after I pray for lunch, and then this half, sorry. And you can sit at the tables, but then once lunch is done, if you would come back to the center, I think it's just a lot easier for the speakers if everybody's kind of in the middle. So if you could do that, we're going to try to gather back about 12:45 to 1 o'clock. I'll kind of just judge. I'll kind of see how we're doing. But I did want to give you something on the tables. So Mark Hamilton, many of you know him. He's kind of a local leadership legend. He was a general, then he was the president of the University of Alaska system, and then he was a vice president of a mining company for a time, and I've had him come speak multiple times, and I asked him this time, and he was traveling on the East Coast, but he did write a letter. He's just some things, his thoughts, as he was really talking and processing about Charlie Kirk and his leadership and that assassination and all of that. And so he said, well, I can send you a letter. And so it's on the tables. So if you want to take that, if that's something you want to discuss at your tables, like some of the leadership that Mark Hamilton thinks stands out in that, you're welcome to have that discussion. Or it can be just a letter you take and read on your own. But we did want to give you that opportunity. So let me pray for lunch, and then we're going to have this side go first, and then we'll have the second side once it looks like everybody's through. One thing I will say, we have had some people call in sick who did RSVP for lunch, so if you forgot to RSVP for lunch, if you will hang back to the very end of the line, there should be a few extra lunches, and you can jump in line and take advantage of that, okay? So let me pray. Dear God, I thank you for this time together. I thank you for each of these leaders who have graciously shared their time and their wisdom with us. Lord, help us to glean what we need to be better, to do better with whatever entity we find ourselves in, that we are leading at whatever level. And Lord, we know that leadership is simply influence, and we have that with our families, we have it with neighbors and friends. And Lord, help us to be the best influencer we can, the most positive, that point people in a positive direction. We want to help people meet their potential, thrive, and flourish. We ask your blessing on this food. We thank you for Alaska Lizzie and her sharing her gifts, her culinary gifts with us today. And we just ask this blessing in the name of Jesus. Amen.